according to Matthew. At that time, Jesus exclaimed, I give you praise, Father, Lord of heaven and earth. For although you have hidden these things from the wise and the learned, you have revealed them to little ones. Yes, Father, such has been your gracious will. All things have been handed over to me by my Father. No one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son wishes to reveal him. Come to me, all you who labor and are burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am meek and humble of heart. And you will find rest for yourselves, for my yoke is easy and my burden light. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
This past week on June 29th, we received one of several of the Supreme Court's rulings in these past couple of weeks. Many highly anticipated rulings in regards to pro-life legislation came before the Supreme Court recently. And while they had some favorable rulings, one of the rulings that was a tough blow for Louisiana was June Medical Services versus Russo, in which the state of Louisiana had a law go before the Supreme Court that would, in a sense, have closed some of the abortion clinics in Louisiana. The law goes something like this in June Medical Services versus Russo. It was the requirement for the abortion centers and the attending physicians of the abortion centers to have admitting privileges to a hospital, for the abortion center to be located in proxy near a hospital in case an abortion goes bad and there's severe hemorrhaging and a young mother would have to receive emergency life-saving medical care. Of course, this is very reasonable. Every other aspect of the health industry is held to high standards of medical care. But yet oftentimes it seems as if the abortion industry gets a pass and are able to offer substandard care for the whole woman. And so the same law in 2016 from Texas had gone before the Supreme Court, and it was narrowly voted down. And once again from Louisiana, it's gone for the Supreme Court in 2020, and we're hoping that it would pass, but yet by one vote, it also was not passed this go-around. So hopefully the third time will be our lucky third try, and we'll get it passed then. But once again, it's to pass a law that an abortion center would have to be located near a hospital, and that the doctor would have to have admitting privileges to that hospital to be able to offer care for the entire woman. In a sense, as we go through this coronavirus pandemic, our health is very much on our minds. Our healthcare providers have certainly been pushed to the limits to provide health. In a sense, there are many different ethical questions that can come up during that time of providing health during the coronavirus pandemic. There's been some ethical debate, especially in areas hard hit like New York City and other major suburban areas where they could have possibly ran out of ICU rooms. Who is served first? Who gets a ventilator and who doesn't? Whether it's the poor and the elderly versus the rich and the young, or if it's those who perhaps have prominence in society versus those who do not. One of the teachings is that we must treat everyone with equal dignity, and that we equally serve the life of each individual person. And we do not give preferential treatment unless it would be best serve the health of the individual person. So in a sense, during this coronavirus pandemic, different ethical questions come up. Even other questions beyond our own nation have come to the forefront. As other countries in South America and Latin America have been truly hit hard by the coronavirus pandemic, in a way even worse than here in the US. Even though we have more recorded cases, they in a sense do not have that same government leadership and healthcare industry to provide for their needs. And so, whether it's the World Health Organization or other organizations from the European Union or America, many organizations have gone to offer aid to these poorer nations that are in need of humanitarian aid during the coronavirus pandemic. But sadly, some of these international organizations and organizations from the UN have required that abortion be included in this aid. And it's really sad to see. It's really sad to see some of these countries that have strong Catholic and Christian foundations, some of these countries that have yet to legalize abortion, that still have laws in their books respecting the dignity of life from a natural beginning to a natural end. It's sad to see that while they're in a time of great need, a time where the international world can come to their assistance, that such international organizations would say to them, yes, we'll give you millions of dollars of food and medical assistance to help you during this time of great need, but you must accept these contraceptives and these monies for surgical abortions and for chemical abortions. If you do not accept these abortion and other female services, then you're not allowed to accept all the other humanitarian aid that your country so badly needs. And so those are some of the ethical concerns going on right now in the international world and here locally at home with the COVID-19. You know, it's a shame that Louisiana didn't have the opportunity as the most pro-life state in the nation to really have that victory with June Medical Services versus Russo. You know, if the Supreme Court would have upheld that Louisiana law, 2 of the 3 abortion clinics in Louisiana would have closed. We have 1 in Baton Rouge, 1 in New Orleans, and 1 in Shreveport. Only 1 of them would have met the requirement to have stayed open. And in fact, as I've kept up with the pro-life community, I've learned that during the coronavirus pandemic, there has been an increase in abortions due to the nature of the quarantining. More women have found themselves with unwanted pregnancies, have sought out abortions. In fact, so much to say that the 2 main clinics in Baton Rouge and New Orleans have had so many women coming for abortion that they've started referring women who are looking for an immediate abortion to go all the way to Shreveport, to drive 5 hours from here to Shreveport because they don't have enough time to take them for their abortion in the local centers. And so abortion has been on the rise, and the Trump administration in different ways has sought to be able to provide coronavirus aid without supporting the abortion industry, but yet many have continued to support the abortion industry. And you can ask yourself, is abortion an essential service? And of course it is not. Of course it is not. But many try to argue that it is. And so it's sad to see during this time of the coronavirus pandemic, when we do so much and take such great measures to preserve life, especially for those who are most vulnerable, that the most vulnerable life, not the elderly or those with an underlying health condition, but the innocent child in the womb who is defenseless, is more vulnerable than ever at this time. You know, one question that has been asked during this coronavirus pandemic by people, by children and even adults and even the elderly, and so many people have a question on their mind, and that is, did God create the coronavirus pandemic? And that's a tough question, an interesting question, and a question I'd like to answer today. The first answer is no. God did not create the coronavirus pandemic. God does not create evil. God is all good, always good in every way. But I would like to read to you some quotes from the Catechism of the Catholic Church today that could help shed some light on the question of evil and why does evil exist, especially physical illness, such as we see in the coronavirus pandemic. First, quoting from paragraph 310 in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, the question is stated: why did God not create a world so perfect that no evil would exist in it? This is a worthy question. Why is God, who is all good and all powerful, did not create a world in which only good exists? Well, allow me to answer once again with a statement from the Catechism in paragraph 312 once again. With infinite wisdom and goodness, God freely willed to create a world in a state of journeying towards ultimate perfection. And it goes on to say that God chose to create a world where there would be good, but that man would be free to choose between good and evil. And that in this world that we live, evil does exist, and it is also allowed to exist, so that man may have the choice to choose the good. And perhaps a little more of a robust explanation for why does good and evil coexist, and what is the ultimate benefit or possible benefit of good and evil coexisting is answered in paragraph 329 to conclude the section in the Catechism on good and evil. Quote, the fact that God permits physical and even moral evil is a mystery that God illuminates by his Son, Jesus Christ, who died and rose to vanquish evil. Faith gives us the certainty that God would not permit an evil if he did not cause a good to come from that very evil, by ways that we shall fully know only in eternal life. End quote. My dear brothers and sisters, we can draw our minds back to the beginning in the book of Genesis, chapters 1 and 2 of Genesis and the creation account, that God created the stars and the skies and the heavens, the birds and the creatures and the creepy crawly things. He even created Adam and then created Eve. He created the human family. He breathed life into them, his very own life. Through his word, all was created. And God said at the end, before he rested, that all he created was good. But yet we know free will came into place because we were made in the image and likeness of God. We know that Genesis chapter 3, the evil one, the serpent, entered into the garden of life and brought death. Not by his own power, but by the power of Adam and Eve to choose. Satan does not have any power without us. Yes, he is a created creature, and he is a powerful angel. So in and of his own, he does have power. But God also protects us. And God never puts us in a position where we have to deny him or deny his will. We always have sufficient grace to choose the will of God and to say yes to God. But Adam and Eve turned their backs on God when they ate of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil that God commanded them not to eat of. And in that moment, they chose a moral evil. They were not forced to choose this moral evil, but they freely chose it nonetheless. And it's in that moment that physical evil entered the world. For it said in that moment, as God cast the serpent to crawl on its belly, he also said that Adam would now have to toil by the sweat of his brow to produce food and grain, and that Eve would experience labor pains and childbirth as a mother. And so it's in that moment of that original sin, that moment of the first denial of God's will, that physical pain and physical suffering entered into the world. And we fast forward to Adam and Eve's children, Cain and Abel. We see the first taking of a life from Cain of Abel, as Abel brought sacrifice to God. So in a sense, we see the first fruits of those sins of our first parents, and brought the first physical evil into the world. What do I mean by physical evil? Hurricanes, tornadoes, pandemics, anything that hurts the life of the children of God in a material, physical way is called a physical evil. The teaching of the church is that physical evil entered the world, in a sense, due to the choice of man to no longer choose the plan that God had from him. When we turned away from God's plan for our goodness and for our prosperity, we brought evil and condemnation upon ourselves. And so, when we reflect on what's happening in our world right now, when we reflect on this coronavirus pandemic, in a sense, God is only the author of good. God only desires good for our lives. He only desires our health and our well-being. Yet evil does coexist with good. And while we seek to choose God's will and to choose the good each and every day, we're always also given the choice to not choose God's will. In a sense, the coronavirus pandemic does not come from God, but ultimately it comes from evil existing in the world. So what is the good news? What is the message of hope? The message of hope is that God only desires the good. And if he's going to even go so far as to allow evil to exist, that he has to have a purpose and a reason for it. And what is that reason and that purpose for God allowing evil to exist? For us to be able to grow in holiness. For us to have the opportunity to choose the good over evil. For us to choose love. To choose love. And truth be told, God allows evil to exist out of love. Just as a parent watches their child grow up and sees a child making a wrong decision, the parent, out of love, at times chooses to not correct the child, knowing that it's in the child's best interest to make their own mistakes. Once again, it's a decision out of love. And so even during this coronavirus pandemic, God is loving us. God is love. He is always love. And he has promised love to us in every moment. So the invitation right now is to love, to be loved, and to offer love to others. And in the love of God, even this coronavirus pandemic can be squelched, so to say. Be squelched by the love of God. God has already conquered this pandemic in his divine providence. He has already conquered it. In a sense, we may be on the journey, but God has already won the victory. So let's place our trust in God's love and God's plan for us, even during this coronavirus pandemic. If we approach this coronavirus pandemic with humility and with trust and with love, if we allow God's love to transform us, to teach us, and to instruct us, even during this time, then even this coronavirus pandemic will bear good fruits. So let us receive the true life of Christ that he desires for us in every moment of our lives.